Welcome back to the Freeborn Podcast. This evening, let's talk a little bit about the City of San Antonio's resolution on hate speech concerning the coronavirus, or the Chinese virus, or the Wuhan flu, or the flu Manchu, or however other ways people are finding innovative, funny ways people are finding to call this coronavirus, this pandemic we have now, to make the point that they believe it originated in China, allegedly. Although I think that most of these are just because people like to name things funny names. And so this City of San Antonio resolution could very well be considered the anti-humor resolution, or the we don't get the joke resolution, or we never saw Seinfeld resolution. We could name it any one of these. But the city of, for those that don't know, and I'm sure pretty much everybody knows because this actually made national news. So San Antonio makes national news when they're the fattest people in the country and when their city council passes stupid laws and when they have 300-car pileups on their freeways. So that's how San Antonio makes the news. But San Antonio made the national news because the city council, led by the mayor of San Antonio, passed a resolution on that, a resolution, and this I'm going to give you the popular version. This isn't actually consistent with the facts, but it's the popular version that's going around on Facebook and on the internet, and that is that the city council and the mayor passed a resolution saying that it is hate speech and therefore illegal to call the coronavirus the Chinese virus or the Wuhan flu, or any other type of name that would associate this virus with the Chinese country, the country of China, or the Chinese people. Now, that's not actually what they did. That's obviously a cartoon version of what happened, although what they did was a cartoon version of what they did. So I guess it's fair to characterize something that is done in a cartoon fashion. So I as much as my wife says that I try to be too objective and defend the defenseless too much. And as much as I try to do that in this, it's very, very hard to defend what the council has done here because how silly this actually is. But let's look at it and try to look at it without making too much fun of it. First off, what you need to understand is that they didn't pass a law saying that you're not allowed to say Chinese virus. They didn't pass a law saying that it is a crime to say these things. They passed a city resolution that is not an actionable law, and in fact, it is a bland and pointless, toothless resolution. It really is a completely pointless resolution. So I want to go through a few things about it because I think it's very interesting and very comical, actually. So here's how it starts out. A resolution affirming the city's commitment to the safety and well-being of all community members and combating, which interesting, they spelled with two T's, combating hate speech. So that's the idea, that they're going to pass this resolution in which they're going to affirm their commitment to the safety and well-being of all community members. Now, I didn't realize that any city council had the need to pass any type of resolution to affirm that they're committed to the safety of their community. The fact that any city council deems it necessary to pass such a commitment makes you wonder, what was their commitment before this resolution? Was there any doubt about this commitment? Is this a new commitment? Did they just decide, hey, let's start worrying about the citizens' safety? I mean, when you pass a commitment like this, you say, okay, now we're real serious. We are going to seriously be committed to people's safety. It makes you wonder where their commitments lied before that. Why all of a sudden the rush to let everyone know they're committed to public safety and they're committed to combating hate speech. So this is what this resolution is about. The resolution isn't what you're not allowed to say. The resolution is that they want you to know that they're really, really serious about your safety and about not liking hate speech. All right. Here's they have a whole list of whereases, which are basically, now I'm not a lawyer. I know that many of you know I'm practically a surgeon, but I'm not practically a lawyer. So you might want to, fact check this. But from my meager law understanding, they start this resolution out with a number of reasons why they're passing the resolution. So these are not actually the resolution, these are the reasons for the resolution. So it starts off and it says, the first one I'm going to read, there's a whole list of them. We're not going to read them all. But the first one says, whereas COVID 19 will not be stopped by political boundaries and was not created or caused by any race, nationality, or ethnicity, and the World Health Organization, the WHO, has cautioned against using geographic descriptors that can fuel ethnic and racial discrimination. Okay, let's stop there and just consider that for a moment. It will not be stopped by political boundaries? No, that's exactly what might actually stop it. So if they had locked down China before it got out, it would have precisely been stopped by political boundaries. And if they were to be able to isolate it into one town or into two towns where this was at and it was nowhere else, and they were to lock those towns down and that is a political boundary, right? When you drive down the freeway and you see a sign that says you are now entering Bexar County, that is a political boundary. When you drive into San Antonio and it says entering into the city of San Antonio, the city that passes insane and ridiculous resolutions, that is a political boundary. Every line, artificial line drawn on a map, every man-made line drawn on a map is a political boundary. When you have a big wall on your southern border, that is a political boundary. And believe it or not, keeping people away from other people actually might stop the virus. At least that's what we're told according to this lockdown. And the body politic is busy creating more and more of these political boundaries. Political boundaries around the workplace, political boundaries around the restaurants, political boundaries around your front door, where people are not allowed to go because the government has arbitrarily, artificially, meaning it's not an inherent or a natural boundary, it is one created by a political decree. And apparently, if we're to believe the people advocating for the lockdown, political boundaries are precisely what will prevent the spread of this virus. So I don't think this says what they wanted it to say. All right, next one. Whereas, so they're starting a new one. Whereas hate crimes, discrimination, and aggression against Asians and Jews are on the rise throughout the country as these groups are being blamed for the COVID-19 outbreak and spread. There's just so many things to critique or to criticize and to laugh at in this. But where's the evidence for this? So crimes, actual crimes, so actual abuse, actual actionable discrimination, beating them up. I mean, what's going on? And where is this rise in these crimes? Is there actually a rise in discrimination and aggression against Asians and Jews? We'll get to the Jews part in a minute. But is there really a rise? I suspect that when the data comes all in, we'll find out that there's actually been an enormous decrease in all forms of assault because everyone's locked away. Just like there's been an enormous decrease in the number of deaths from traffic accidents because nobody's driving their car. I suspect we're going to find that there has not been a massive increase in aggression and discrimination towards Asians or towards Jews. Now, I could be mistaken, and I couldn't find any data from 2019, much less from 2020. All of the hate crime data stops at 2018. So it'll be a couple years before we are privy to the numbers or till the numbers are released and we can assess whether or not this monumental resolution by the very woke City Council of San Antonio is actually based on any empirical evidence, or this is simply, they're simply tooting their own horn as to why they're doing this. They're fabricating the reason. They're fabricating the necessity for their actions. But where does the idea of the Jews come from? Now I know partly where this is coming from. And yes, there has been some criticism of some Jewish communities, specifically the Hasidic Jews in New York, that are continuing to have their mass funerals, their large scale funerals, even though they were told they're not supposed to have these type of gatherings, and they're still doing it. And so there's some criticism to that group. And I don't want to get into discussing that. That's a real issue that should be discussed seriously. So I don't want to get into it and mix it with this cartoon version of a resolution. However, what is interesting is this resolution, if you listen to the popular version of it, if you listen to the commentary and editorial on this resolution, this is about the Chinese virus. So why would calling this pandemic the Chinese virus have any effect whatsoever on the Jews? How are they getting dragged into this? Is somehow in the city council's mind, if we say that this is the Wuhan flu, that somehow that means that the Jews are going to be assaulted? I don't know what. It's like, if I was the Jews, I would be saying, why am I getting dragged into this? Why are you bringing us up? I mean, why even put that seed in anybody's mind that we're part of this? If this is all about trying to discourage people from calling this the Chinese virus or the Wuhan flu, don't bring us up into this. Don't give people any ideas. I mean, why open that can of worms? And yet, this is what they do. So apparently, Asians and Jews are under enormous oppression and aggression, more than ever before. And therefore, we need to declare calling this Chinese virus a crime. Now, that's the popular version. The real version is they don't call anything a crime. They just simply say it's very naughty, naughty speech. It's very nasty speech, and you're being very, very ignorant, and you're being very mean when you make these kind of jokes, and you label this in this way. And the Jews are going to pay for it, apparently. All right, next one. Whereas COVID-19 is a public health issue, not a racial, religious, or ethnic one, and the deliberate use of terms such as Chinese virus or Kung Fu virus to describe COVID-19 only encourages hate crimes and incidents against Asians and further spreads misinformation at a time when communities should be working together to get through this crisis. And then they follow that with, whereas the Jewish community has been targeted with blame, hate, anti-Semitic tropes, and conspiracy theories about their creating, spreading, and profiting from COVID-19. Again, how is keeping people from saying Chinese flu protecting the Jews? How is this resolution having anything to do with that? This isn't called the Jewish flu. This is called the Chinese flu. So how does that have anything to do with the rise in aggression towards the Jews? And if it doesn't have anything to do with it, then how can we know it has anything to do with the rise in aggression towards the Asians? So if calling this Chinese flu results in a rise in aggression towards the Jews, and therefore it's a total non sequitur, well, then it's likely a non sequitur that calling this Chinese flu has anything to do at all with any supposed rising aggression towards the Chinese, or towards the Asian Americans, or towards anyone who might resemble China. And not all Asians are Chinese. Apparently, to the city council, they all look the same to them. But no, there are many, many Asians who are not Chinese. I doubt the Koreans care much at all if you call this the Chinese flu. I doubt the Japanese are all that torn up about this being called the Chinese flu. And the last I checked, they were Asians. I doubt Hawaiians care if it's called the Chinese flu. I doubt if Cambodians care if it's called the Chinese flu. And so there's a lot of silliness in this resolution. Now, the idea here is that if we label this pandemic by anything other than very boring names like COVID-19, SARS-2 COVID, coronavirus, SARS-2 COVID-19. You got all these acronym names that are not very interesting. They're not very compelling, and people generally want a real good name. We like marketing, and we want to market this virus well. And so Chinese flu or Wuhan flu or China virus or any of these other names are probably going to be a lot more interesting to say, and they're a lot funnier. I know I get a big kick out of them when I hear them. And so those are the names that people are probably going to gravitate towards. And this is historical. Most pandemics have names like this. Many of them do. You have the Russian pandemic. You have the Constantinople pandemic. You have the St. Cyprian pandemic. I mean, even the apostolic fathers have gotten pandemics named after them. China should feel very privileged to be put into the amazing company, into the august company of someone like Cyprian and others like this. But we could look at, for instance, the Spanish flu. Now, is that discrimination towards the Spaniards or towards the Spanish-speaking people? I mean, I speak Spanish. Are you discriminating against me by calling this the Spanish flu? Is this the Spanish nation, the Spanish culture, or is it the Spanish language? But we have the Spanish flu. Now, the reason why, it's interesting here, the reason why the Spanish flu is called the Spanish flu isn't because it originated in Spain, and it isn't because Spain had the most affliction of it. It isn't because they suffered the most deaths of the flu. In fact, they did not. The reason why the Spanish flu is called the Spanish flu is because in Spain, at the time when it happened, which is during World War I, they were neutral in that war. And therefore, they had not imposed censorship on the media. And so the media in Spain was able to report the death tolls and the sicknesses caused by the Spanish flu, by the flu at that time, but which was ravaging the entire world, or most of the world. But all the other nations involved in World War I had put censorship on all the press, and they weren't allowing the press to report anything that could in any way give their enemies any leverage, which included that pandemic. And so all anybody read about this flu was in Spain. So because of media censorship by the government, resulting in de facto media bias by the mainstream media of the time, a term that apparently now is extremely discriminatory came into existence, and we now know that pandemic as the Spanish flu. So the point here to be learned is that when you try to censor speech, you're going to end up with a worse situation than you're solving. City Council. What about Lou Gehrig's disease? Is that discrimination against Lou Gehrig? Maybe, if you're Lou Gehrig, you'd rather not have a disease named after you. I don't know. Maybe you don't mind that. If you had I know some people say, I don't want to be remembered for the disease I had. That's fair, but is it discrimination? Are we discriminating against Lou Gehrig by calling it Lou Gehrig's disease? And there's so many others. And what about other things that aren't diseases? What about when we talk about Chinese food? Are we discriminating against the Chinese by calling it Chinese food? I mean, we could make the same argument. If you've ever been to a Chinese buffet, well, that might have been where that virus originated, come to think of it. I hate buffets. I mean, isn't that the original pandemic testing laboratory? They have the same sneeze guards over all the food like they do now. I mean, is that where they came up with all these ideas for controlling the contamination coming out of those places? And you say, well, it's not the China virus. It didn't actually come from China. Chinese food found in the Chinese buffet that you go to, that doesn't come from China either. And now that I'm bursting bubbles, I just want everyone to know And you might want to cover your kids' ears right now because I'm gonna reveal a truth that you may be trying to keep from them. Taco Bell isn't Mexican food, and neither is Taco Cabana, by the way. In fact, there isn't hardly any Mexican food in San Antonio. Now, that may mean news to a bunch of you white people out there that actually think that you are making a trip to the border when you go to Taco Bell. But you are not. When you go to the Mongolian Grill, is that discrimination against Mongolians? I mean, we could go on and on and on and on. This is the kind of nonsense that you adjudicate when you're dealing with kindergartners and first and second graders, trying to tell them to be nice and not be calling people nasty names, and that sticks and stones will break your bones, but words will never hurt you. This is the kind of nonsense that kindergarten teachers and elementary school teachers deal with. This isn't the kind of things that a serious city council should be wasting their time on. So what are they going to do about this? I know some of you are really concerned about the effects of this on free speech, and you think, well, they're now making it illegal to say China virus. Well, if that were the case, I would suggest that anybody like myself who is really concerned about free speech should go down there and stand in front of City Hall with a big old sign that says China virus and Wuhan flu and any other insensitive name you can come up with and make a statement for free speech. But that's not what is really happening. So one of the things, and again, I've made this issue on a number of different points regarding regarding this pandemic, the China virus. I actually don't like calling it that, and it isn't. I like it now more that the city council is telling me I shouldn't, but I actually don't like the name myself. I think COVID-19 or SARS-2 is more descriptive, more interesting to me. Anyway, now, but on a number of different news stories that have come out on this issue, I've cautioned you to do the actual research. Like in that movie Plandemic, or the vignette of that movie Plandemic, do the actual research. The court transcripts are available. Don't read opinion pieces. Don't read editorials. Go find the actual information, the source information. Or don't share it. Don't cite it. Don't refer to it if you don't know what you're talking about. In the same way with this, a lot of people came out very, very upset, very, very concerned about what they're doing. And that's fair. Fair enough. If the city council is passing a law saying that it is a crime to say China virus or Chinese virus or Wuhan flu, then we should be very concerned. But before we get all concerned, we should actually go and read the resolution. And it's available. It's a matter of public record. If you've commented about this or been worried about this, but you haven't actually looked it up, well, then that should be a lesson that you need to look these things up before you make comments on them. So what is the city going to do? This is a matter of public record. You can download the resolution and read it. And this is what they're going to do. They have 5 statements they make about what they're going to do about this. First thing they say is that the city of San Antonio denounces anti-Semitism, anti-Asian bigotry, and all hateful speech, violent action, and the spread of misinformation related to COVID-19 that casts blame, promotes racism or discrimination, or harms the city of San Antonio, Asian and Pacific Islander, Jewish, immigrant, or other communities. They denounce it. So the first thing they're going to do is denounce anything that harms anybody. Well, that's very comforting. I'm glad to hear that our city council is denouncing things that harm people, things that cast blame on anybody, things that promote racism or discrimination. That's good. And any violent action, they're denouncing that too. The second thing they're going to do, the city of San Antonio's joins cities, counties, and states across the country in affirming its commitment to the safety and well-being of all community members, including the Asian and Jewish communities, and in combating hate crimes targeting Asians, Jews, and Pacific Islanders. I would hope they're also going to denounce all crimes targeting anybody, not just ones that belong to certain identity groups. And if we're actually still a country and a city of law, and we're going to continue to prosecute crimes against people, well, then this is just a big ball of nothing. The City of San Antonio, Section 3, will continue its efforts to protect residents and targets of victims of hate and to prosecute and curb hate acts related to COVID-19 in partnership with nonprofit organizations, the Bexar County District Attorney's Office, the San Antonio Police Department, and other law enforcement partners. So they're gonna prosecute crime. They're going to go after people that beat someone up, that commit assault, that commit battery. Wonderful. Aren't we already doing that? Or has San Antonio Police Department been turning a blind eye to somebody getting assaulted? I don't think so. So basically, they're just going to keep upholding the law. Well, that's good to know. We definitely needed a city council meeting and city council resolution to let us know that San Antonio is going to continue to uphold the law. Now, I do want you to notice that it is hate acts that they are actually going to act upon, not hate speech. This is the magic act that they are performing in this resolution. They're talking about hate speech, but they know that they can't act upon any type of speech for the most part in America. Now, if you incite actual violence, then that does not fall under the protection of the First Amendment, and it never has. So if you go out and you tell a mob of people to go find an Asian person and kill them, that is illegal, and it should be illegal, and you should go to jail for inciting that form of violence. Freedom of speech does not cover inciting violence. It never has. And we don't need the City Council of San Antonio to make that clear. That's always been clear. It's crystal clear. But saying something that somebody doesn't like to hear, you can call it hate speech all you want, but that's not actually a legal term. That's not an actual crime. And if they try to prosecute that, it is going to be deemed persecution, not prosecution. And they will lose that court case. Section 4. The City of San Antonio pledges to support the inalienable rights of all people in our community who should be treated with respect and must remain safe during this pandemic. We call upon all our residents to treat each other with respect. This is just the law. This is nothing new. They act like they've discovered something here. Like somehow people think, hey, we're in a pandemic. I wonder if the city no longer cares about anybody and it'd be okay to go out and beat somebody up. I wonder if it'd be a problem to the city leadership if I go out with a bat and I go around and start cracking some skulls. This is just absolutely absurd. And it's ridiculous that our city council, well, I don't live in San Antonio, so your city council thinks that this is what they needed to do. This is a symptom of government, this small-time government that are so desperate to get their name in the news and be seen as visionary and fearless leaders in time of trouble. They're getting tired of the governor of New York State getting all the press. They're getting tired of the governor of California getting all the accolades. And so now all these little podunk towns and large towns with podunk mentalities, which is kind of what San Antonio is, are trying to get in on the action. They want to be seen as doing something. And therefore they have to do something that is really original. But it can't be too original, because if it's too original, well, then it's simply illegal. So they're going to take all the laws that are already on the books, that are already being enforced by the fine police department in San Antonio, and they're going to act like they just invented them. If I were the police department of San Antonio, I'd be offended at the suggestion, at the implication that this has not been enforced during the entire pandemic. I would be offended that they're implying that the police department has not cared about anybody who has been assaulted or abused. Wonderful, wonderful message from the city council. And the last thing they're going to do is number 5, the city of San Antonio urges residents to join us in calling attention to these harms and denouncing hate to help keep us all safe during this unprecedented pandemic and beyond. I love that last little thing. And beyond. This isn't going to stop here. We're going to go beyond. We're not just going to be worried about assault during the pandemic. We want you to know this is going to continue for a good long while. No kidding. And what's this about the unprecedented pandemic? Do you know how many people have died in San Antonio in this unprecedented pandemic? 56 people. As of right now. 56 people. Do you know how many people have died in the same amount of time from the flu in Bexar County? That 56 is actually Bexar County, but we all know, if you're from San Antonio, you know that Bexar County is San Antonio and San Antonio is Bexar County. You know how many people have died in Bexar County in the same amount of time? 400 people from the flu. I'm not sure that this is an unprecedented pandemic. I think this is more like an unprecedented cartoon response to a pandemic. So thank you, City of San Antonio, for giving the world one more thing to laugh at us about. Thank you for being with us for the Freeborn Podcast. I'll be back next time.